Hallo miteinander, I'm Gishidi6, and this is Touhou Shinsekai New World. Here is the successor to one of the most remarkable of all fan games, Ankake Spa's Scarlet Curiosity. Back in 2014, it was just about the most impressive looking and best playing action RPG you could find among derivative works. Of course, a long time has passed and the competition wasn't lazy. Comparable titles, like The Disappearing of Gensokyo, have matched that quality in the meantime. Is it really possible for Ankake Spa to raise the bar again like they once did? Well, they're already impressing with a world map to freely move around in. Controls are exactly as they would be in the regular game, which is pleasant and organic. Rather than leading us through a linear sequence of the game, I've singled out a couple of side quests that I think you'll find especially interesting. The first of them is present in both Reimu's and Marissa's campaign. Locations for the main quest are marked by red yin-yang orbs and are never replayable. Optional quests are marked by green and always stay available. The one I've alluded to is right here, Notices from the Insects, and I've given you an amusing preview of it a few weeks ago. Before we begin, here's the equipment screen. I favor gear with a high value in the special stat item drop rate. Next to that is our skill customization. Looks alright so far. Our character level is 17, the mission recommendation 19, so we are still somewhat in the early mid-game. The initial plot of Touhou New World is that Sumireko Usami has made it to Gensokyo, not as a projection but physically, which in itself is alarming. Other, more unexpected events begin unfolding from there, but they are of little concern for this side quest, which is more about a routine incident of the human village. The people are suffering from a bug infestation, and we're not just talking swarms of tiny insects, no, but monstrously huge ones too. Marissa volunteers to look into the matter, and she doesn't have to look very far. The problem comes straight to us. You may know the giant centipede as an enemy from Scarlet Curiosity. Out of harm's way, Kozusu. Just not straight through your furniture, please. So far, the insects have not been hostile, just creepy and upsetting. That's enough for us to investigate and drive them off. Fun fact, a scene of Suzunan was the first piece of teaser material this game ever received. Kozusu would dust off the bookshelves in it, an animation of hers that can't ever actually be seen in the real game. The giant centipede unfortunately slipped through a crack and escaped. Nothing we did wrong, it's just the mission setup. A setup that still goes on with excellent artwork of Marissa and Kozusu. That's another quality that got improved on. Scarlet Curiosity's cutscene art wasn't bad, and even less so for its time, but now the girls have more expressions and better shading. Marissa learns of a list of places where the bugs have been sighted. Traveling there will be instantaneous. In fact, this mission is pretty much just a set of arena fights. Sounds a little bland, but since you do a lot of exploring in the main missions, it's a welcome change. Our first stop is the dojo where the game's tutorial took place. This is the only other time you visit it. Finally, we get into the action against killer hornets trying to sting us up close. We exploited that. An innovation of Touhou New World is the perfect guard. any melee attack with a blue shine can be blocked, upon which you slow down time and become invulnerable on top. Yup, parrying. It's 2023 and every game is Sekiro. Even our Ankake Spa is-likes. But in earnest, it's a good gimmick, well implemented and rewarding. Up next, we get to the general store, where we would normally do our shopping and customizing. The vendors have been evacuated, only critters were delivered. The multicolored diamond we picked up was a random item drop. As in the predecessor, loot is Diablo-esque in nature. It's always a mystery how good weapons, armor and accessories are when you find them. And with what's ahead, we should swap out some gear, once we get back control at least. Nobody should be surprised that the queen of these insects was Wriggle Nightbug all along. She has trails of fireflies circling around her. Very fancy, I like such details. We won't be able to admire it for too long, as Wriggle is very upset with us. Without giving much explanation, she attacks. Let's quickly pause and adjust now. Bosses never drop loot, and there's specialized gear without bonuses to item drop rate, but excellent combat stats. No reason not to wear it here. Boss fights are without a doubt Touhou New World's biggest strength. You wait for your foe to start an attack, dodge out of the way, and counter with your own technique. It's a neat rhythm. It could be that narrow spark, or something more potent, like our bomb Stardust Reverie. Said bomb is actually meant more for enemy groups. It's good enough, but we have something better for strong single targets. I'll show it to you later. As she gets low on health, Wriggle begins unpacking her own spell cards. Bosses usually run towards the center of the arena for this, and when they do, you just concentrate on evading. There's a blue shield around bosses during spell cards, making them invulnerable, so you are not meant to ever counterattack. Wriggle's Phantom Insect Swarm is a real oddity in that she doesn't use it from the center of the arena. It's still easily recognizable as a spell card due to the iconic sound effect from the official games. Our opponent is on her last leg, and done. Wriggle absolutely isn't a challenging boss, not compared to others. Back in Scarlet Curiosity, she was nothing to scoff at. You fought her really early, and she was very fast, zipping here, there, and everywhere. Touhou New World gives you many options for ranged combat, so mobility in a foe on its own is not that threatening. Now that we've settled the Bug Lady's temper, she can finally explain what is up. It comes down to her being pretty darn stupid. Wriggle has started the insect notification service to get in contact with humans and help them out. The fatal flaw is that Wriggle's agents cannot speak. They just stare at you menacingly. So the people panic and it all becomes a crisis. Got to admit, the humans are pretty dumb here too. When you negotiate with a yokai that they remind you of your appointments, wouldn't you expect to see other yokai? Maybe Wriggle gives them the wrong idea as the adorable poster tomboy. With that, the side quest is in the bag. Your typical to-do after one such is to stop at the store. Its location is right here, marked by the Japanese coin. Makes sense, it's a place to spend money. Except you almost never do. The directly purchasable gear tends to be so basic, it's hardly ever worth looking at, let alone getting. No, Nitori Kawashiro is the kind of merchant meant to buy up all of your outdated equipment. How the player is not setting her up for bankruptcy, I have no idea. Much more interesting is the enhancement pod, giving you a lot of control on how you want your stats to develop. Once again, I valued item drop rate the most and maxed it out. My next highest priority is pure attack power, which affects any attack you do. There is no distinction between physical or magical attacks. So much for the store. Later in the game, a reforging function also unlocks, which is easily the best thing to spend your money on. Get ready for a jump cut, as the next level I wanted to show you is situated all the way in the post-game. We're even starting in the middle of conversation, as the mission briefing held nasty spoilers, as in it name-dropped the final boss. This game is still very young, so I didn't want to shove that in your face. So this is another side quest, and it's called Settling the Nightmare. The reason I picked it for us is because it uses my favorite map, the urban district of the outside world. Before we go into the thick of it, let's swap out some of Marissa's skills so that you'll get to see all of them. Our lineup is now Magic Missile, Witch Leyline and Violent Brew. Having beaten Marissa's campaign, I don't actually recommend those techniques, but let's use them for a minute or two to acknowledge their existence. Equipment dropped during this mission is of very high quality. Looking at that uncommon Kinshi dress, it's definitely better than what we were wearing. Holding the attack button lets us dash. I recall that to reach top speed in Scarlet Curiosity, you would either bunny hop or use Remilia's dive bomb. No such silliness here, we just have the ability to run fast, plain and simple. As said, the urban district is my favorite zone of the game. Not only do I like how a shrine maiden or magician from a fantasy paradise are out of place in a modern city, I also really enjoy the music of it. The composer, Hachimitsu Lemon, has given the area a bossa nova vibe, but not one that is all the way positive. There was still an obvious bit of melancholy sprinkled in. That killer Roomba just ran us over and made us belly flop. Not to make excuses for sloppy play, but someone did enter my room at that point and I got distracted. Even without that, it's hard to do well with our current skill set. Techniques don't cost any special resources. Everything is subject to cooldowns. There's even a stat meant for reducing those cooldowns. Whenever you equip a new skill or spell, it'll be set to its maximum unreadiness, possibly so that you can't do any trickery to bypass your delays. We just switched back to techniques I'm more comfortable with. They're called Sweep Aside, Meteoric Debris, and Narrow Spark. The spell card we just activated is called Satellite Illusion, your typical damage shield. It's not terrible when you're up against singular spread out enemies, but generally doesn't have a great reputation. I was reminded to swap it for Stardust Reverie when I saw that excellent diamond bracelet. That's a good spell for clearing out enemies in a wide radius, and my standard for levels. Next to the Roombas, drones are also an enemy linked closely to this environment. The machines have taken over. Curse you, Skynet! Or whoever equally sinister is actually responsible. The shining machine parts we're collecting are quest items. We have to fight these enemies for them, we can't just go to the end of the level. Battling Roombas always cracks me up, as it reminds me of a Miku Miku dance sketch I really like, in which the Taoist crew owns an automated vacuum. Those medieval folks riddle what it's used for, and Futo even mistakes it for being alive. I also have an automated vacuum in my household. It's made by the company Miele, and even though I know it is, I always call it a Roomba as a goof. That's the power of brands. A new part of the map had just unlocked, and our mission objective now tells us to defeat the giant foe. Who could that be? Certainly not Shinmyomaru. Only a few of the Touhou girls are at best temporarily massive. The direction of said giant foe is on our radar. We're going exactly where it isn't pointing, as that always leads to treasure. I don't know what those tree stump yokai were meant to be, but I do know they have little to do with a modern city. They're encountered in all sorts of places, but not too commonly. They're also pretty weak and irrelevant. It is indeed so that you are very unlikely to be killed by fodder enemies in Touhou New World. Almost all of the challenge was placed upon the boss duels. The henchmen are mainly there to power you up with experience points. New equipment always gives you a preview of its stats before grabbing it, and I saw that Kinshi dress had deliciously high item drop rate on it. Now let's rush towards that giant foe, a mini-boss that's about to be revealed as a literal battle tank. Yup, we're assaulting the means of modern warfare with smacks from a household broom, as well as whimsical star-shaped magic. Taking out the super fairies with a bomb was wise, but Kappa reinforcements have already spawned in their stead. The pilot of that panzer also happens to be a Kappa. You can see her popping out of the hatch during one of the attacks. This opponent has a total of 48,888 hit points, not a whole lot by this point of the game. On top of that, its attacks are infrequent, predictable, some are even parryable. Those that announce themselves with red markings, however, are not. We demolished that thing in a jiffy. I'm not much of a tank aficionado. I don't know what real model would match the design, but with how rubbish it performed, the Kappa may as well have brought a Bob sample. We make our way to the nearby park and plaza, where just a few more robotic enemies await. The wide-spreading star shot we're using is called Meteoric Debris. It's technically not a powerful projectile, but still so worth it as it's wonderfully brainless. You practically cannot miss with it. With the last quest item collected, one of Yukari's yucky eldritch portals opens up. I was already expecting a boss behind it, so we equip our iconic Master Spark, a full moon broom, and an armor that really makes me wish there was visual distinction for it on the model. I'd love to see Marissa fighting for her life in giraffe-themed pajamas. The broom in particular makes a difference of about 50% our previous attack power. Our opponent is going to feel that. We were teleported to a building called Fukami Tower. I actually looked up whether this was a real major site in Japan, but all I could find was some patent office that looked nothing like it. From how it's presented, we should be having a duel with Sumireko. She looks very majestic in her cape. The official games make her behave very bratty and boisterous, and she can't stand all the normie dweebs around her. Touhou New World interprets her much kinder, yet little of that may be relevant, as we seem to have stumbled upon a snickering, mysterious shapeshifter instead. Marissa's new imposter reveals to us that she is a being of dreams. She also plans to kill us, take our place in Gensokyo, and leave all of our friends oblivious to our true fate. What a chillingly horrific concept, although not one that hasn't been done before. My favorite example would be Arnold Schwarzenegger's box office smash hit Stolen Identity 3. That's not actually the name of the movie. It's The Sixth Day. We prime an early Master Spark, a sound idea, as the sooner a spell card is used, the sooner it will be available again. Fake Marissa has of course spell cards similar to our own, like this interpretation of Stardust Reverie. Remu's campaign features a fight with regular Marissa at some point. The shapeshifter idea is a good way to transport that over to Marissa's story and still have it make sense. Oh, how I hate this boss's satellite illusion. If it's used together with a parryable attack, it won't actually be parryable. The orbs break your guard on contact. That's why we got belly flopped. The Master Spark is self-explanatory, as in, of course it will melt us in seconds, but so long as we stay on cue and ring around the boss, it's all an empty threat. Here's a frustrating technicality. We whiffed our Master Spark, as the boss was still a split second away from becoming vulnerable again. Game is just very particular about that. We were too impatient and have to hold out a little bit longer for it. At least we get a very cinematic victory. Perfect guard, followed by a clobbering and a narrow spark. The imposter was defeated, yet still stands like the battle never happened. You may think this means the mission isn't over, but I guess Ankake Spa just didn't want to show our opponent falling over or something? Marissa fears that the befriended Sumireko might have been this doppelganger entity from the very start, and escapes with many doubts in her mind. With that, the mission is over, and normally it could be sensible for the video to be as well. But later on the very day I played that side quest, a patch was released. It brought along minor improvements, and more importantly, 2 higher difficulty settings. Let's check out how tough Touhou New World can become. We are switching to a different file of Remu's campaign, where the game is done, 100% it. The top-end challenge that is offered is this mission, fittingly named The Ultimate Battle. There is indeed nothing beyond it at this moment. This quest, located at Muenzuka, is simply a 5-part boss rush. I call it a boss rush, but you are at least checkpointed for each battle. There's little to explain here story-wise. Gensokyo's holding a tournament, and Remu Hakure wants to win for the bragging rights. Our equipment has been adjusted in advance, as have our skills, which are Cruel Purification, Yin Yang Shot, Yokai Buster, and the Demon Binding Ring. We saw a blur of blue, purple, and red as we entered. Not much of a surprise, it's an adorably square Kogasa Tatara. Not a square in her mindset, but in the shape her artwork was cut off. I guess the umbrella was just too thick and chunky for the interface. Suitable for this preliminary match, Kogasa is a total underdog. All of these are refights, and the Karakasa was an early enemy and weak as dirt back then. She should be an easy warm-up, right? Right? So those new difficulties are called Bullet Hell and Bullet Hell Plus. On Bullet Hell, the Danmaku is either faster, denser, or both, and vastly more damaging. The only difference Bullet Hell Plus has to Bullet Hell is that the game runs accelerated, artificially worsening our reaction time, so to say. Look at the breakneck speed of those shots, it's no joke, and we are indeed struggling hard. Sometimes your own spell cards can be used to skip past a boss's, but that's only really recommended when you can't handle what's coming. This might have been a clutch victory had we been wiser with our bomb. Well, that's the Bullet Hell Plus difficulty for you, where even Kogasa is relevant. You may be wondering how you get health back in this game. In Scarlet Curiosity, it was simple and classic. You break open vases and collect health-restoring bubbles from them. Even boss fights usually had these vases. It wasn't a bad system, but disengaging from battle to heal with pickups always felt like an awkward solution. In Touhou New World, it's handled differently. You can hold up to 4 healing items that you use with a push of a button. Whenever your first item is used up, it gradually regenerates as if it was one of your skills. Potentially, that is very overpowered, but it didn't save us in that second attempt. So yeah, the health system here is a combination of rationing your Estus flasks and regenerating slowly yourself. The result is that the occasional mistake doesn't matter much to you, you'll always recover if you can stall for time. What we really have to fear is repeatedly high damage over a short time frame, as our girls aren't actually too tanky. Such a high lethality system has worked well for other fan games, like The Tempest of Heaven and Earth, or the mentioned disappearing of Gensokyo, and it's not a bad fit here as well, particularly for the many bosses you face. Third time's the charm, Kogasa was subjugated. I think what made the biggest difference was that we didn't allow her to use her secondary, more advanced spell card, where umbrellas are thrown fast and chaotically. I am no good at handling it. Like I said, the little Tsukumogami that could is weak by numbers. I never claimed her patterns were easy. Between encounters, there's always some loot. The ultimate battle also has the ultimate drop table, yet what we're wearing already stems from here. No need to inspect it. Our second challenger is a Benoi. Reisen Udongi in Inaba was relevant to the main story, as Touhou New World is also a partial retelling of Silent Sinner in Blue. Even early trailers revealed the Scarlet Devil Mansion's crappy moon shuttle, so of course Lunarians and Lunarian-affiliated characters like Reisen would have to be involved. She wields her deceptively cartoony ray gun and is a fighter of much trickery, not raw power. The illusions at her disposal mean that knowing is half the battle. Even though Demon Binding Ring covers much ground, it is considered Reimu's boss-killing spell. Cruel Purification is a sudden and wide melee swing, whereas Yokai Buster is a spread shot in the same vein as Marissa's Meteoric Debris. Our Yin-Yang shot looks like a slow, straightforward projectile. Still, it's better than it seems, not just for its power, but it adjusts your aim through minor homing capabilities. I know I've said that right after missing with the last 3 Yin-Yang shots, but believe me, on average, it makes that skill very effective. I didn't think that Demon Binding Ring would be enough to win, but we got really lucky with the crits. Critical hit chance should be around 1 in 3 at this point of the game, and the actual critical hit multiplier over 200%. Both of these are also stats you can find on items. Reisen was not too much of a problem. I suppose not everyone is equally adjusted through the Bullet Hell Plus difficulty. The next opponent might just be my favorite in the entire game, and it's not just because I like Doremi's suite and the smug equals 3 faces she makes, but as the encounter itself is pretty remarkable. It is untypical for the Ruler of Dreams to bother with such a tournament. Her pompous reason for coming is to remind us of our nightmares. That's a little creepy. Doremi's primary spell card already proves how this fight is weird and interesting. A huge globe is spawned and it follows us relentlessly. The secondary spell card is a lot more vanilla, but at the same time, quick and deadly. Too deadly for us just then. These spell cards cannot be brute forced, they must be understood to have a chance. To evade the globe, it is necessary to dash, and that's quite an oddity you won't be used to. As said, the dash is mostly used for travel. It takes a while to start up and is difficult to control, so it's too cumbersome for most combat situations. That's why Doremi's boss fight is so memorable to me. Others don't consider the dash. As for the spell card with the beams, they're avoided by rhythmically jumping back and forth. Quite easy, so long as you don't miss your cue. The Baku's many cartoony weapons and tools are another reason why I enjoy this encounter, yet not everyone may share my opinion there. I've heard that Doremi's moveset can create some unfair combinations, mainly when she pulls out the vacuum cleaner while you're fleeing from the globe. While I wouldn't say that situation there was unwinnable, nor any other I've witnessed, I can see how that could happen. While the vacuum sucks, you are also meant to dash away from the pull. Using a bomb like we just did can of course save you in an emergency. Reimu's other spell we aren't using, by the way, is the iconic Fantasy Seal. It's weaker, but covers a slightly wider area. Even if you're up against fodder, the range advantage to our Demon Binding Ring barely seems worth it. Interesting to know about the dash is that its delay to get going was actually greatly reduced with the same patch that brought the difficulty levels. What it also fixed was that your girl gets up much quicker when an attack knocks her over. You are invulnerable while belly flopped, but it's still nice that you don't have to wait longer for no reason. Imagine a developer patching in purely positive changes that even waste less time for the players. Activision Blizzard would be shocked and disgusted. Almost there, and good night, Doremi. As much fun as it was, we must move on. I am also going to miss the wonderfully gentle, but also somewhat sinister sounding violin of this lovely boss track. This file where we are playing as Reimu is the older one. I picked her first because in fan games that let you choose between the Shrine Maiden and the Ordinary Magician, the first is usually the beginner character and the latter for the advanced. The same is kind of true here, but is one perhaps overpowered, and who did I like better? Well, it's a close race, and I'll tell you in a minute. Right now, we are greeted by Suika Ibuki, the former villainess of Scarlet Curiosity, who doesn't actually play too major of a role in this adventure. Nonetheless, there was no way in old hell this rowdy ogress would let this tournament slip by her. Suika's patterns haven't changed too much from the previous game, but that means little as she has always been a force to be reckoned with. This first spell card isn't too bad to handle. The rocks are best dodged instead of jumped over. I hate these spreading fireworks though, they barely ever leave me unscathed, and the other spell card just as much. When Suika disperses into a horde of herself, everything is just too fast and too much. We'll have to give this another go. It certainly wasn't Reimu's fault we lost, as she is indeed the character I do a little better as than Marissa. The red and white skill set is just somewhat more plain and straight to the point, whereas Marissa is often fancy and leaves herself open with more commitment to attacks. Will this be our end again? I don't think so. We have enough heals in stock to make it through. They saved us for a few more seconds until the next damage spike caught me off guard. Something that could improve our chances would be perfect guarding, as Suika has a 3-step punching combo where every instance is parryable, and in a row if you're on the mark. To finally wrap up about the characters, my preference here matches how in Scarlet Curiosity I'd rather play as the versatile and accurate Sakuya than the steamrolling and chaotic Remilia. We're doing well enough catching those parries, but for no apparent reason, our attacks are missing often during the slowdown. I can't say for sure why Suika is a little glitchy in that regard, but I've noticed that the Bullet Hell Plus difficulty was still marked as experimental. Perhaps the accelerated movement messes with hitboxes. Now we're finally in a situation where we can give the Oni a good beating. That was about 40,000 hit points reduced to 0 in a single combo. With that, Suika is not beaten, she decides herself to have lost. Apparently it's her thing to just loudly proclaim her defeat once she's satisfied. The gauntlet is almost over, so I'd like to review the game while we still have the chance. Touhou New World is as solid as ever in its Ys-like gameplay, yet one thing about it is pretty disappointing. It feels like half of the game is made up of levels from Scarlet Curiosity, and only the other half is new content. For any newcomers, this wouldn't be a problem, but for all the returning veterans like me, it's a bit frustrating. Contending with us for Grand Champion is the out-of-this-world Watatsuki no Yorihime, who was also teased long before release. The fresh earth air stinks like a farm stable to her. I really like that line. Yorihime may or may not be the final boss, but what just about all players agree on is that her battle is the strategically hardest in the game. On my first regular difficulty playthrough, I've made it to her deathless, and she became the first to make me retry. While all of Yorihime's attacks are dangerous and hit hard, it's the secondary spell card that wipes out practically all first-timers. We're about to see it, and it's something that won't look like much of a problem when someone handles it right. The triple mega beams. Keeping up with her speed is manageable, and the rhythm to jump over the purple orbs is pleasantly consistent. The trick is to come to a full standstill as the spell card starts, or else the beams will rotate towards the direction you're running. Contact with them is basically a one-hit kill, no surprise there. The fight is very much in our favor. If it looks like I oversold it, Bullet Hell Plus also doesn't seem to adjust it all too much. That, and it's an encounter I'm more used to and never underestimate to begin with. Through our victory, I've shown you what I've wanted to. The repeat levels of Scarlet Curiosity I intentionally did not show. I respect the occasional throwback stage, and the rule that Gensokyo's geography wouldn't magically change, but they should have toned it down. Despite them being there, I still think Touhou New World is a good fan game. Probably not innovative enough to be Touhou Fan Game of the Year 2023, depends on what comes out and what's delayed. With that, I'm Geschichte6, bis bald!